Hey, good morning, Rabbit, everybody. Happy September. No, I missed the September video because I was moving my daughter into college for her second year. It was a great time. I know a lot of you were doing similar things because I saw your pictures on Facebook. It's that season of the year when a lot of kids go back to school. So I thought it would be a good time to go over the nuts and bolts of 529 college savings plans. So the purpose of my video series is really to dig into kind of some nuts and bolts questions, some really kind of, stuff you need to know to make wise decisions. Whereas my blog, which I'll link to in the comments, is really getting more into the human side of money and, the emotional stuff that makes things maybe simple but not so easy. So I named the series Rabbit because when I was a kid, my friends and I decided that on the first of the month, if Rabbit was the first words out of your mouth, you'd have good luck. And I do believe that knowledge is a key to good luck. So today, 529 college savings plans and the things you need to know. So first of all, the name, 529, it comes from the paragraph in the tax code that sets up the rules for the plan, like a 401k, right? That's a tax paragraph as well. So that tells you you're getting a tax break for college savings. The way it works is from the federal income tax standpoint, you do not get a deduction for money you put into a 529 plan. However, kind of like a Roth IRA, the money that you put in as it grows, you're not paying tax on it. And if you use it for what they call qualified expenses, you don't pay tax on the withdrawals. The state rules vary state by state, as always, the income tax situation. In Pennsylvania, you actually get an income tax deduction for up to $14,000 of contributions per year per child. And that also, the nice thing about Pennsylvania is you don't have to use the Pennsylvania state plan. The strange thing is for 529 plans, they're actually run state by state, and each state collaborates with an investment company to come up with their own plan. So for my own kids, I have accounts with the Virginia plan and the Iowa plan, but I still get that Pennsylvania state tax deduction from my contributions. So what do you need to know on picking a plan, right? Some are better than others. There's a really good website called savingforcollege.com, and you'll want to look at the expenses involved because that's always important when you're doing investing, as well as the investment options that are available to you. So there are maximum balance limits for the plan, which is interesting. The idea was that you couldn't put away more than a college education might cost. We all know that that number has gone up a lot. But again, that maximum balance would vary state by state. So you want to check on that. Each child can have more than one. I mentioned I've got, plans in 2 different states for my own kids. And then you can also gift, right? Grandparents can open up a plan for a child. Grandparents can contribute to the plan that you might have for your own children. You can contribute to plans for other kids. So I mentioned the qualified expenses. If you're using the money in your 529 plan for qualified expenses, then you don't pay any tax on the way out. So what's a qualified expense? Tuition, room and board, technology like a laptop or internet expenses, these kind of things, books and supplies. There are other things that don't qualify like travel and transportation. They changed the rules in 2018. You can actually also use it now for tuition only for private school, for elementary and high school. And there's some rules around that, so you want to check on that as well. So what happens if you want to use the money or need to use the money for something other than a qualified expense? So remember I said you don't get a tax deduction for the money you put into it. That means you can withdraw that money at any time without a penalty, right? You've already paid your tax on that. But for example, in one of my plans for my kids, I put in $7,000 per kid a long time ago, and now they're each at around $14,000. So if I needed to use that money for something other than a qualified expense, if I pulled out the full $14,000, I'd owe a penalty on the $7,000 of growth. I got to put my hand in the frame. And it's a 10% penalty. So in my example, if I pulled out the $14,000 to use for something other than college expenses, I owed the 10% penalty on the $7,000. So I'd pay a $700 penalty. But in the meantime, my account has doubled in value, right? So the penalty is maybe not the worst thing in the world, but of course, ideally, you do want to use it for a qualified expense. So there are some other rules, like you can only change your investment options once a year. So you might want to think, like for my daughter, she's now in college. So a couple years ago, I went in and I adjusted the investments I had in there to be more conservative. the market's been up for quite a number of years. I wanted to lock in some of those gains and reduce the risk that I was exposed to some market declines. But you can only make those changes once a year. You can swap from one state to another, from one plan to another, again, one time a year. You can even swap beneficiaries. So let's say, good news, your oldest child gets a full ride and doesn't need the money in there. You can swap the beneficiary to somebody else in the immediate family. So children, or siblings, and I think even cousins. You can even have a 529 plan for yourself. So if someday you hope to go back to school and get an advanced degree, you can open a plan for yourself. You can do that too if you don't have kids yet, and then swap the beneficiary to your own child. So the hesitations I see among people are, what if my child gets a full ride or doesn't even go to school? So I mentioned you can change beneficiaries, and even if someone gets a full ride, they're still going to have to buy a laptop. They're still going to have to pay probably some qualified expenses. So I think, in that case, it's probably better off to still have some money put away just in case you don't get that full ride or that athletic scholarship. Then I've also heard people say, hey, it's going to mess up my chances of financial aid. And financial aid is a really complicated question, but I just wanted to mention this one thing. So most schools use something called the FAFSA, which stands for something about federal application student aid. I can't remember what the other F is for. But the FAFSA counts a certain percentage of parent assets and student assets that they expect families to use for college. And they come up with this calculation that leads to your expected family contribution, your EFC. But the interesting thing is most assets in a 529 plan are considered a parent asset because the parent is the custodian of the plan. The parent assets, you're only expected to contribute 5.64% towards college. So if I, in my example, had $14,000 in my daughter's 529 plan, I'm only expected to use 5.64% of that towards college every year. So therefore, it's not really making that much of an impact on my financial aid eligibility. Now, to be clear, not all states use the FAFSA. Not all colleges use it. Some use another plan called the CSS, but they still count parent assets at a lower rate than, say, if my daughter had the $14,000 in an account of her own. They expect the student to use their assets at a higher rate. So in my opinion, having some assets put away for this expense is a good idea, right? Otherwise, it can be a giant draw on your income. Student loans is a huge problem in our country. Parents taking out student loans, it's really a burden. So, thinking about a way to start putting away some money might be a good idea. But either way, I wanted you to know a little bit about it, the basics, the nuts and bolts. So happy October to you, and I wish you all very good luck.